Chapter 8, Polychromy, Mutations of an Interface. Quote, mere color, unspoiled by meaning and unallied with definite form, can speak to the soul in 1,000 different ways. Oscar Wilde, The Critic as Artist. Color can speak volumes. It can direct 1,000 different messages about fitness payoffs and trigger for each an adaptive response. Color is a window on fitness and also a jailhouse. Try to imagine a specific color that you've never seen. I've tried and nothing happens. Surely there are colors that other people or other animals have seen that I have not. But I cannot concretely imagine even one of them, just as I cannot visualize a space having 4 dimensions. Color, like each of our perceptions, is both window and prison. As a window on fitness, color is not flawless, just adequate to guide actions that keep us alive long enough to reproduce. Color, like each of our perceptions, compresses the complexity of fitness payoffs to bare essentials. Every window has a bounding frame. The human eye only sees light with wavelengths between about 400 and 700 nanometers, a minuscule fraction of the entire electromagnetic spectrum. This is not just data compression, it is data deletion. Outside our tiny window of color, there are volumes of data about fitness, which we discard at our peril, including microwaves that can cook us, ultraviolet rays that can burn us, and X-rays that can give us cancer. What we don't see can, and sometimes does, kill us. But it usually does so only after we've raised offspring. So, to these perils that rarely impair our chance to reproduce, natural selection leaves us blind and vulnerable. Our perceptions tell us about fitness, but what they say is not veridical or unabridged. They tell us less than we may selfishly wish for, enough to have and raise children, but not enough to make us vibrant centenarians. There is a wealth of information within the tiny window of wavelengths that we can see, yet we compress it, ruthlessly, down to just 4 numbers at each tiny region of the eye. We get 3 of the numbers from photoreceptors called cones, which come in 3 kinds, L, M, and S, and the last number from photoreceptors called rods. The way they compress data is illustrated in Figure 18. Figure 18. Sensitivity curves for the 3 types of cones in the retina of the eye, L, M, and S. The sensitivity of rods, which mediate vision in low light, is given by the R curve. Consider the red curve labeled L. It shows the sensitivity of the L cone to various wavelengths of light. If a photon of light has a wavelength of about 560 nanometers near the top of the red curve, then the L cone has a much better chance of catching it and sending a signal than if a photon has a wavelength of 460 nanometers near the bottom of the red curve. Similarly, the M cone is most sensitive to light at about 530 nanometers, and the S cone is most sensitive at about 420 nanometers. These 3 cones, L, M, and S, are critical to our perception of color and are most useful in bright light. The remaining dashed curve, labeled R, shows the sensitivity of rods, which mediate our vision of shades of gray in dim light. The overall sensitivity of the rods is much higher than that of cones, allowing them to operate in dim light. This is massive compression of data. We ignore all photons outside a minuscule window of wavelengths and squeeze the remaining sliver of photons through the 4 filters of Figure 18. The human eye has 7 million cones and 120 million rods, each carrying compressed information. The circuitry of the eye then squashes this down to 1 million signals and forwards it to the brain, which must correct errors and decode actionable messages about fitness. We can catch ourselves correcting erasure errors in the Olympic rings of Figure 19. The image has 5 black circles, each inscribed with a colored circle. The interior of this circle is white. Your visual system detects an error. It presumes that the inscribed color once filled the disk but got erased. It fixes the erasure by injecting color. You see faint disks of blue, orange, gray, green, and red. The effect is strongest if you look slightly to the side of the figure. This watercolor illusion, was exploited in older maps of the world to paint countries with distinct colors. Figure 19. The Olympic rings illusion. The colors that fill each ring are illusory. The visual system creates them to correct an erasure error. We can catch ourselves again in the act of correcting color errors in the neon square illusion shown in figure 20. The image on the left consists of black circles with arcs painted blue. The space between circles is white, but your visual system presumes that a transparent blue square was erased, and it corrects the error by filling in a glowing blue square with sharp edges. You can check that the square is illusory by covering the circles. The blue glow disappears. Figure 20. The neon square illusion. The glowing blue square is illusory. The visual system creates it to correct an erasure error. Your correction of errors and decoding of color follows a sophisticated logic that vision scientists are still working to understand. The right side of figure 20 is just like the left side, except that the little blue circles have been added. Although the image on the right has more blue contours than the image on the left, you no longer presume that a blue square was erased, and you no longer paint in a glowing square. Your logic here appears to involve sophisticated reasoning about geometry and probability. If a red transparent square were floating just a tad above a pattern of large and small circles in the image on the right, then the edges of that square would have to appear to align perfectly with the edges of the tiny circles. Only if such geometry of squares and circles were seen from a special or non-generic viewpoint would you get the image on the right. If the viewpoint changed just a little, then the alignment of the red square with the small circles would be disrupted. This logic, requiring a generic viewpoint, appears to be a key principle we use to decode and correct information about fitness within our interface language of color and geometry. When we decode, we reject interpretations that have low probability. Figure 21. 2 frames of dots from a movie. When the frames are displayed as a movie, the visual system creates blue bars that move, glow, and have sharp edges. In the process of correcting errors and decoding messages about fitness, we sometimes construct complex icons that integrate objects, colors, and motions. Figure 21, for instance, shows 2 frames from a movie available online. Each frame contains dozens of dots, each dot keeping its same position from frame to frame. From one frame to the next, some dots can change color either from black to blue or vice versa. But when you view the movie, you see the blue bars with sharp edges scrolling to the left over a field of black dots. You fill the white space between blue dots with a transparent blue surface, correcting an erasure. You delimit this blue surface with sharp edges, correcting another erasure. You bind the edges and the blue surface to create a single object, a transparent bar, and then attribute a leftward motion to your creation. You have, by the end of this process, decoded a message about fitness into the language of your interface, the language of objects with shapes, positions, colors, and motions, a message that can now guide your next action. Figure 22, Joseph's hat illusion. The brown rectangle on the left side of the hat is printed in the same color ink as the yellow rectangle on the front of the hat. Complex shapes guide complex actions. Consider Joseph's hat in figure 22. You decode complex shapes for its brim and crown, which undulate in 3 dimensions. As a result, you know that to grasp it by the brim requires your hand to adopt certain grips and orientations, whereas to grasp it by the crown requires others. You know that your hand can grasp the brim more firmly than the crown without distorting its shape. The hat is an icon of your interface whose complex shape encodes information critical to adaptive action. Your hand itself is an icon of your interface, not an objective reality. You must decode the shape of your hand, no less than that of the hat. We don't know what the objective world really is, and so we don't know exactly what we're really doing in that objective world when we grasp a hat. All we know is that whatever we're really doing, our interface only lets us see a 3D hand grasping a 3D hat. Hat and hand and grasping hat in hand are messages about fitness that are compressed and decoded in the error-correcting format that we perceive as 3D space. My very body is an icon, hiding a complex reality of which I'm ignorant. I don't know my real actions. I know only how the icon of my body appears to interact with other icons in my interface. Joseph's hat sports many colors, which we decode as surfaces and lights. We interpret the brown rectangle on the left side of the hat as a brown surface in direct light. and the yellow rectangle on the front of the hat as a yellow surface in the shadow. You can also see these two rectangles as the same color. If you cover all of the hat except these two rectangles, then they look the same brown. In fact, when creating this image, I used the dropper and paint bucket tools of Photoshop to make the pixels in the two rectangles identical. You can decode this message in two conflicting ways. One in which the rectangles are the same brown, and one in which they have different colors. Neither portrays objective reality, both are simply messages about fitness. You decode disparate messages in different contexts. The hat is an icon whose shapes and colors help you to secure fitness payoffs. Its description is not exhaustive, just what you need in the moment. Its shape informs you how to grasp it and how to place it on your head to best protect you from the elements. It also has a category, hat, that offers useful tips about fitness. Hats don't bite, they are inedible, they don't run, but they do protect from sun and cold. An icon of a different category, say snake, offers different tips. It bites, it's edible, it doesn't run but does slither quickly, and it won't protect you from the weather. If you are forced to grasp it, its shape informs you to use a different grip than you would use with a hat. As we have discussed, the idea that physical objects are just ephemeral data structures that describe fitness payoffs differs sharply from the idea, now standard in vision science, that physical objects are elements of objective reality, and that the goal of vision is to estimate their true shapes and other physical properties. It also differs from the claim that our interactions with physical objects give us direct, non-inferential access to their real properties. These differences are basic. The interface theory says that space and time are not fundamental aspects of objective reality, but simply a data format for messages about fitness. A format evolved to compress and correct such messages. Objects in space-time are not aspects of objective reality, but simply messages about fitness coded in a format of icons that is specific to the needs of Homo sapiens. In particular, our bodies are not aspects of objective reality, and our actions don't give us direct access to pre-existing objects in space-time. Our bodies are messages about fitness that are coded as icons in a format specific to our species. When you perceive yourself sitting inside space and enduring through time, you're actually seeing yourself as an icon inside your own data structure. Our senses evolved to encode fitness payoffs in a language of experiences. That language includes our experiences of emotions, from anger, fear, distrust, and hate to love, joy, peace, and bliss. Our emotions comprise a rich vocabulary. Specific emotions may be triggered by specific colors, a possibility now being studied by the science of color psychology. Preliminary results suggest the following associations: red with lust, power, hunger, or excitement; yellow with jealousy or happiness; orange with comfort, warmth, or fun; green with envy, harmony, or good taste; blue with competence, quality, or masculinity; pink with sincerity, sophistication, or femininity; purple with power or authority; brown with ruggedness; black with grief, fear, sophistication, or expensiveness; white with purity, sincerity, or happiness. The list paints a wide brush. There are, for instance, many shades of red, each with its unique hue, saturation, and brightness. Fire engine red feels nothing like a burgundy. The emotion evoked by a color surely depends on its specific shade. The evoked emotion also depends on visual context. The patch of brown on the left side of Joseph's hat in figure 22 has the hue and saturation of opaque kush, a greenish brown voted by thousands of Australians to be the ugliest color in the world. The same patch on the front of the hat looks yellow, which is not the ugliest color in the world. The pixels in the both patches have the same color coordinates, but these color coordinates evoke different emotional responses in the two different visual contexts. The evoked emotion may depend on culture. The shade of red, ubiquitous in regalia of Spanish bullfights, may signify emotions to Spaniards such as exciting danger or national pride, which would be lost on most Americans. The emotion may depend on particularities of personal experience. The shade of yellow flourished by banana spiders may evoke idiosyncratic fears in some arachnophobes. Nuances of color can trigger nuances of emotion that inform our actions in pursuit of fitness. Even plants, which may have no emotions, use nuances of color to guide a variety of adaptive actions. The growth tips of some plants have photoreceptors that detect blue light and guide growth toward open sky. They hunt light much as we hunt game, tracking blue photons to wrangle light. The leaves of some plants have photoreceptors that are sensitive to red light. When they catch red light, the plant knows, underquotes, that it's morning. And when they subsequently catch a deeper red light, the plant knows that it's nightfall. This allows the plant to know the length of night and thus to know the season. This guides its actions such as flowering. Its knowledge, underquotes, to be sure, is limited and easily fooled. Flower growers can flash red light in the middle of the night to trick their plants into flowering on time for Mother's Day. Shining red light on a single leaf is enough to do the trick. Most plants have a blue receptor that regulates their circadian rhythms, such as their daily opening and closing of leaves. This receptor, cryptochrome, is the same receptor that regulates circadian rhythms of animals, including humans. It differs from another blue receptor, phototropin, that plants deploy in their tips to grow toward the light. Plants can also get jet lag, underquotes. If you artificially shift the time of day when they receive blue light, they take a few days to adjust their rhythms, so that their leaves again open and close in synchrony with the light. Some plants are photoreceptor show-offs. As I mentioned in the preface, Arabidopsis thaliana, a small weed that looks like wild mustard, has 11 types of photoreceptors, more than double the number that we employ. But A. thaliana is upstaged by lowly cyanobacteria, which have colonized the earth for at least 2 billion years, possibly as long as 3.5 billion years, and generated the oxygen in the atmosphere that allowed animals to evolve. Some cyanobacteria employ their entire bodies as lenses to focus light, and at least one, the Cyanobacterium Fremiella diplosiphon, boasts 27 different photoreceptors, which it harnesses in ways not well understood to intelligently harvest light of many colors. Color perception has deep evolutionary roots. Discriminating colors is a powerful tool employed by millions of species to decode critical messages about fitness. It's no surprise that the colors are firmly wired into our own emotions. However, our understanding of precise associations between colors and emotions is primitive, and the proposed associations between colors and emotions that we listed earlier must be tested by experiments. For instance, an experiment by Stephen Palmer and Karen Schloss suggests that people prefer colors that they associate with objects they like, such as the blue of fresh water. They dislike colors that they associate with unsavory objects, such as the brown of feces. These associations between colors and objects are forged over eons by evolution, over centuries by culture, and over decades by personal experience. Palmer and Schloss found that the preference for a color depends on the objects it brings to mind and how close that color is to the color of each such object, and on the emotional response to each object. This result is a promising start. It is, however, just a start. The human eye can discriminate 10 million colors. Even if we restrict attention to simple patches of uniform color, as in the experiment by Palmer and Schloss, there are many more links between color and emotion to explore. Patches of uniform color are rare in nature. More frequent are combinations of color and texture called chromatures, underquotes, which have a richer structure, can encode more data about fitness, and can trigger more precise reactions. For instance, in figure 23, the 4 green chromatures share, on average, a similar color of green, but their different textures trigger different reactions. The green broccoli looks tasty, if you like broccoli. The green strawberry looks inedible, and the green meat looks disgusting. The solid green square lacks this precision of emotional punch because its texture is trivial. In like manner, the red chromatures share a similar color of red, but because they have different textures, they prompt different emotional reactions. Figure 23, 8 chromatures. Chromatures are more versatile than uniform colored patches at triggering specific emotions. Although we can discern an impressive 10 million colors, this number pales in comparison to our prowess with chromatures. A square image with just 25 pixels can house more chromatures than the visual universe harbors particles, making chromatures a rich channel for messages about fitness. We see hints of this in chromatures depicted above, which speak eloquently to our emotions with a precision impossible in the patois of uniform colors. The eloquence of chromatures includes nuanced descriptions of shapes, such as the myriad bumps of broccoli and the elegant sweep of a strawberry. These descriptions are carefully crafted calls to action: grasping, squeezing, cradling, pinching, brushing, nudging, grazing, biting, stroking, kissing, and caressing. The eloquence of chromatures extends further to forecasts of the feedback that can be expected on fingers and lips that answer the call to action: abrasive, bristling, burnished, bulging, chafing, downy, elastic, furry, glassy, hard, icy, jagged, knobbed, limp, moist, numbing, prickly, pocked, ragged, scratchy, slippery, silky, stiff, tingly, unctuous, velvety, wooden, wet, and yielding. Chromatures do not pontificate about objective reality, about materials and surfaces of objects that are presumed to exist even if no one looks. Instead, chromatures counsel us how to act and warn us what to expect as we forays for fitness. They are a priceless innovation, a compact representation of fitness payoffs within our species-specific interface. They hide the truth and keep us alive. For many companies, color is central to branding. We can see this from the golden arches of McDonald's and the red bull's eye of Target to the blue bird of Twitter and the green siren of Starbucks. Companies spend fortunes choosing, marketing, and defending their colors. T-Mobile is a wireless phone carrier that spent considerable amount of time and expense branding a specific magenta. AT&T then set up a subsidiary, AIO Wireless, that competed with T-Mobile and featured a plum color in their stores and marketing that was similar to T-Mobile's magenta. When T-Mobile sued AIO for infringement, AIO hired expert witnesses who noted correctly that the difference between the plum and the magenta is about 20 times greater than the human threshold for discriminating colors placed side by side. This difference is large enough, they argued, to avoid infringement. When T-Mobile hired me to reply as an expert, I pointed out that a shopper rarely sees the two colors side by side, but instead must distinguish them from memory. Our ability to distinguish from memory is poor, and the difference between plum and magenta is, as it happens, at the limit of our ability. The court agreed with this point and in February of 2014 issued an injunction against AIO. Federal District Court Judge Lee Rosenthal wrote that T-Mobile has shown a likelihood that potential customers will be confused into thinking that AIO is affiliated or associated with T-Mobile based on the confused association between AIO's use of its plum color and T-Mobile's similar use of its similar magenta color. Closed quotes. T-Mobile released a statement saying that the ruling, under quotes, validates T-Mobile's position that wireless customers identify T-Mobile with magenta and that T-Mobile's use of magenta is protected by trademark law. As this case demonstrates, color can be prized intellectual property, but a chromature can be far more valuable. Chromatures are more informative than colors and can be crafted to target specific emotions or to be congruent with specific products and contexts. For instance, color psychologists sometimes claim that red encourages appetite, but does it? Consider the 4 reds in the figure 24. The first 2 may whet the appetite, but the last 2 may trigger disgust. The difference is chromatures. Figure 24, 4 red chromatures. Red only triggers hunger if the texture is appropriate. Tomoko Imura and her colleagues have shown that chimpanzees use chromatures to determine the freshness and desirability of fruits and vegetables, such as cabbages, spinach, and strawberries. If you doctor a chromature, you can manipulate the emotional reaction of chimps and humans. Our perceptions are a user interface that evolved to guide our actions and keep us alive long enough to reproduce. Once we grasp this and free ourselves from the conceptual straitjacket of assuming that we perceive reality as it is, then we can reverse engineer our interface, understand how it codes information about fitness and guides our actions, and then apply this knowledge to solve practical problems, such as creating chromatures that evoke specific emotions. It is no small challenge to pull a Houdini and exit our conceptual straitjacket. Thinking about synesthesia, a fusing of senses, can help with this trick. One reason we're sure we see reality, and not just an interface, is that we're sure others see things pretty much the way we do. Suppose I say to you, on the course, that red tomato on the table looks ripe and ready to eat, closed quotes, and you agree. I naturally assume that your perceptions are the same as mine, and indeed the same as objective reality. Why else would we agree? Surely it's because we accurately perceive the same reality. But even if we agree in conversation, we may disagree dramatically in perception. 4% of humans are synesthetes, who live in perceptual worlds quite foreign to the rest of us. There are many kinds of synesthesia. In one, each sound of a language triggers a unique experience of color. In his book, Speak Memory, Vladimir Nabokov describes his own fine case of colored hearing, under quotes. Open quotes, the long A of the English alphabet has for me the tint of weathered wood, but a French A evokes polished ebony. I see Q as browner than K, while S is not the light blue of C, but a curious mixture of azure and the mother of pearl. Closed quotes. Most of us simply hear the sounds of language, but Nabokov also saw each sound as a specific color or even a specific chromature, as his descriptions of, under quotes, polished ebony and, under quotes, curious mixture of azure and mother of pearl, closed quotes, suggests. Colors and chromatures appear in a wide variety of synesthesias. They can be triggered by music, printed letters, printed numbers, days of the week, months of the year, emotions, pains, odors, tastes, and even personalities. In grapheme color, under quotes, synesthesia, each symbol for a letter or number is seen as having a color. For instance, capital A might look red, or capital B might look green, and so on through the entire alphabet. In gustatory tactile synesthesia, each taste has an associated shape in 3 dimensions that can be felt by the hands. The synesthete Michael Watson described his experience of spearmint to the neurologist Richard Saitowich. Open quotes, I feel a round shape. It's also very cool so as to be some sort of glass or stone material because of the temperature. What is so wonderful is the absolute smoothness of it. The only thing I can explain this feeling is that it's like a tall, smooth column made of glass. Closed quotes. Watson's experience of other tastes was equally detailed. For instance, Angostura bitters, open quotes, this definitely has an organic shape. It has the springy consistency of a mushroom. It feels like oily leaves on a short vine. I guess the whole thing feels like a scraggly basket of hanging ivy. Closed quotes. Notice what Watson is revealing. He perceives a complex object, a smooth column of glass, a basket of ivy, not as a veridical perception of a mind-independent object, but simply as a useful data structure for representing properties of a taste. Mint is nothing like a column of glass, and Angostura bitters is nothing like ivy. This exemplifies the claim of ITP that your perception of a physical object is not a veridical sketch of a pre-existing object. It is a data structure that you create as needed to compress critical information about fitness payoffs into an actionable format. Once the object has served its purpose, you then garbage collect its data structure to free up memory so that you can create a new object with your next glance. Contemplating Watson's synesthesia can free our imagination from the chokehold of pre-existing objects, from the belief that our object experiences are low-resolution versions of real objects in objective reality. Music triggers colored shapes in the synesthete Danny Simon, another subject interviewed by Saitowich and Eagleman. On the quotes, when I listen to music, I see lines moving in color, often metallic with height, width, and most importantly, depth. Closed quotes. She explains, the shapes are not distinct from hearing them. They are part of what hearing is. Each note is like a little gold ball falling. Closed quotes. The artist Carol Steen enjoys several forms of synesthesia. Smells trigger colors, graphemes, words, sounds, touch, and paint trigger rhapsodies of color, shape, and even movement and location. Her synesthesia streams a torrent of creative visuals from which she ladles inspiration for her painting and sculptures. Open quotes. These brilliantly colored and kinetic visions or photisms are immediate and vivid. Closed quotes. Steen describes the bounty of a synesthetic experience. Open quotes. The shapes were so exquisite, so simple, so pure and so beautiful. I saw a year's worth of sculpture in a few moments. Close quotes. These synesthetic shapes and colors can be exquisitely detailed. In 1996, Steen sculpted Saito, a maquette in patinate bronze about 8 inches tall, which depicts the complex shapes and chromatures of her synesthetic experience of a grapheme Saito, under quotes. Her experience is not a vague memory or conceptual association, but instead a concrete encounter, a detailed perception. But even her meticulous sculpture omits the dynamic evolution in time of her synesthetic experience, which she describes as shapes that dance. As these examples illustrate, in many cases a synesthetic experience is not a hazy imagination or weak conceptualization. It's a genuine perception, as immediate and compelling as smashing your thumb with a hammer. Notice that Steen is telling us the same important message as Watson. Saito illustrates that Steen sees a precise 3D object, not as a veridical perception of a pre-existing object, but simply as a useful data structure for representing, in this case, a particular grapheme. Synesthetic experiences are consistent over time. A grapheme color synesthete, for instance, who experiences a specific color for each grapheme of a letter or number will report the same colors in experiments performed weeks or even years apart. Consistency is used as a test of genuineness, under quotes, to discriminate true synesthetes from others who simply invent sensory connections by free association. Some grapheme color synesthetes report seeing different colors in different parts of single graphemes, while others report seeing the saturation of the colors decrease as the contrast of the graphemes decreases, again suggesting a perceptual rather than conceptual origin. Synesthesia runs in families, as Francis Galton first noted in the 19th century, but the specific associations do not. A parent, for instance, might see the letter A as red, whereas their child might see it as blue. Moreover, even the specific senses involved can vary. A parent who sees colors for tests may have a child who sees colors for graphemes. This suggests that synesthetic associations, although they sometimes involve cultural artifacts such as alphabets and numbers, are not simply taught in families but are influenced by genetic inheritance. This is supported by studies of genetic linkage that indicate that synesthesia is influenced by genes on the specific chromosomes known as 2q and 16, and also possibly on 5q, 6p, and 12p. It is too early to reach firm conclusions, but a study of 19,000 subjects suggests that there are 5 different synesthesia with different genetic origins, clusters that David Eagleman and his colleagues identify as colored music, colored sequences, such as letters, numbers, months, and days of the week, colors triggered by touch or emotions, spatially displayed sequences, and colors triggered by non-visual stimuli such as taste. What are these genes up to? One possibility is that they enhance neural connections between different sensory areas of the brain. In the case of color grapheme synesthesia, for instance, the cognitive neuroscientists Villainu Ramachandran and Edward Hubbard noted that a cortical region in the fusiform gyrus, whose activity is correlated with color perception, sits next to a region correlated with graphemes. They propose that synesthetes may be endowed with more neural connections and thus more crosstalk between the two regions than non-synesthetes. This prediction was confirmed by the cognitive neuroscientists Romke Rowe and Stephen Schulte with diffusion tensor imaging, which uses magnetic resonance imaging and sophisticated algorithms to estimate connections between regions of the brain in living human subjects. They found that the connections are greater in synesthetes, who are projectors, under quotes, who see the colors as out in the world, than in synesthetes, who are associators, under quotes, who see the colors in their mind's eye, under quotes. They also found regions in the frontal and parietal lobes that are better connected in synesthetes. No cortical regions were found to be more poorly connected. Synesthesia is anomalous, but not generally pathological. Indeed, synesthetes can enjoy certain cognitive advantages. Some synesthetic associations, for instance, can enhance memory. One grapheme color synesthete studied by the psychologist Daniel Smilek and his colleagues could recall arrays of numbers better than non-synesthetes, and her memory improved further when the printed color of each grapheme matched her synesthetic color. Daniel Tammet, an author, speaker, and high-functioning artistic savant, perceives a unique color, shape, texture, and feel for each natural number up to 10,000. Using these synesthetic associations, he memorized and recited more than 20,000 digits of pi, a European record. Synesthetes beat non-synesthetes in some perceptual tasks. Michael Bernisi found that synesthetes who see synesthetic colors can discriminate between colors better than non-synesthetes. Synesthetes who feel synesthetic touches can discriminate between touches better than non-synesthetes. Julia Simner and her colleagues studied synesthetes with sequence space synesthesia, in which sequences such as numbers, letters, days of the week, and months of the year are seen as a specific visual forms at specific locations in space, and found that they are better than non-synesthetes at mentally rotating a 3D object to see if it matches another object. I studied this brief tour of synesthesia with the promise that at the end it may free us from a straitjacket, the belief that we see reality as it is. The tour reveals that synesthetes enjoy idiosyncratic perceptions that guide adaptive behavior and are as vivid, complex, and nuanced as our own. For all we know, Michael Watson's idiosyncratic interface was richer and more adaptive than our own. We do know that it was an aid to Watson in cooking. As Richard Saitovich observed, he never followed a recipe but liked to create a dish with an interesting shape, Sugar made things taste rounder, while citrus added points, to the food. We have no grounds for claiming that Watson's interface was no less dynamic than ours. The shape changes with each moment, just as flavor does. French cooking is my favorite precisely because it makes the shapes change in fabulous ways. We have no grounds for claiming that our interface is veridical and Watson's an illusion. In fact, neither is veridical nor an illusion. Each is an adaptive guide for a critical decision. What shall I put in my mouth? It is an accident of evolution, not a necessity of veridical perception, that Watson's brand of interface is less common. Recall, as we discussed earlier, that some mishap millions of years ago handicapped all vertebrates with an eye of stupid design. Our photoreceptors hide behind the curtains of neurons and blood vessels that block and scatter light. Cephalopods dodged this mishap and inherited a better model. Perhaps some mishaps saddled us with an inferior interface for sensing the quality of foods, and as luck would have it, a mutation gave Michael an upgrade. If, in the future, our survival requires hot cuisine, then natural selection could favor Watson's kind of synesthesia, and future generations might all feel columns of glass when they eat mint. The point is, we do not have true or ideal perceptions. Instead, we inherit a satisfactory interface with a limited variety of formats: smells, tastes, colors, shapes, sounds, touches, and emotions. Our interface evolved to be fast, cheap, and just newsy enough about fitness to enable us to raise our offspring and pass on our genes. The formats are arbitrary, not the bona fide structures of reality. There are countless formats, other modes of perception, that could serve just as well, or better. We can no more imagine them concretely than we can imagine a specific new color. What is it like to be a bat snatching moths on the wing using sonar? Or to be a moth jamming that sonar in the nick of time? To be a beetle on a bottle, or a moose on a bronze bison trying to mate? Or a mantis shrimp with 12 kinds of photoreceptors, 6 for ultraviolet? For these and countless cases, we just don't know. The tinkering of evolution can concoct perceptual interfaces with endless forms most beautiful and most wonderful. The vast majority of these, however, are to us most inconceivable. Evolution is not finished tinkering with the perceptual interfaces of Homo sapiens. The mutations that bless 1 in 25 with some form of synesthesia are surely part of the process, and some of these mutations might catch on. Much of the tinkering centers on our perceptions of color. evolution defies our silly structure that our perceptions must be veridical. It freely explores endless forms of sensory interfaces, hitting now and then on novel ways to shepherd our endless foraging for fitness.